like it like cracked again. So apart.
Well, I hate to see it go, but I'm glad it's
Trying to
Braced.
yeah. This is the main.
Yeah.
So
And now
they're all
what town
up
are you
there.
moving in?
Huh?
What town are you moving back to?
Olivet, South Dakota.
Did he,
Where's that?
did he put a suit on for you?
Like between Sioux Falls and Yankton, Claremont, and East Side.
My mother went to college at Yankton College.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
we're about 40 miles from there.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Chris,
My parents met at
Show it
I'm
to him.
from Rapid City.
You took me to shoes.
Yeah, so that's where the original place was.
Excited about that.
I thought, yeah, you had lived on the west side, so you
he's a 40
South Dakota accent.
Yeah,
South
the size
Dakota.
of suit.
I'm from
That's crazy.
and Kansas City, here.
Yeah, my mother's from Redwood.
Okay.
And my dad's from here. So, yeah. Got a lot of roots better than accent.
Yeah. It's good to be going there.
We'll miss you. What's the church situation? Because it seems like church press is not very good there, but you'll find something. You'll probably get some.
Yeah, there isn't very answer.
Yeah, there's not. And they fight, and then so they split, and there's all these tiny little ones instead of a big one like here, which is very annoying. There's like 4 of them around the city.
And one of them, I did my research, and one of them says,
Chris,
call first, because they don't have service
calling
every
big.
Sunday. Depending on how you do it.
Yeah, it's too bad they can't get along.
Price.
I know, somebody here said start your own net, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I think I'm too lazy for that.
Well,
And they also have
for
tall
you
and
where you need to be.
big,
Like you have.
like shirts, sweaters, and all that. They're on cleanse right now.
Okay. I thought Penny's was out of business.
Well, go there, so we'll keep them in business.
It's a slow death.
I don't know.
Haley, I heard you're running for office. That's exciting.
What? Oh.
So, do you, for that, do you need to have a campaign manager? Oh my goodness. Brave soul.
Yeah, Tanya, my Aunt Tanya, she's my campaigner.
Okay.
You know, I was on the city council for years, and one year, the vote was tied, so we had to draw cards to see who won. And I won with Jeff. He had a
Just one card? High card wins?
Yep, my card made it. Isn't that crazy? And it was actually in the bylaws. That's how you.
Really? That's funny. Hey, Debbie.
Hi, you.
See what blue is?
I did, literally. And the road posts have been down.
I know.
So everybody's coming up that hill and turning around. Crazy. I didn't think I was going to be able to see you today, because I was supposed to be down there one month. And the event's in Las Palmas. I know, so I get to come see you. Yay! Well, I do have one more Sunday. See, I'm going to be gone. I leave on Wednesday. Okay. To go to No, to go to Tennessee.
She'll be gone and I'll be gone.
Oh, so
This is our last meeting.
what happens when you sell that?
I know.
I'm really excited about this stuff. I love to.
Are you starting Genesis?
For 2 weeks?
Well, I'll be watching it online.
Okay. I have to tell whoever's back in the AV booth if you have some snarky comment to make.
You gotta remember, you're an hour ahead.
Yes.
Oh yeah, you'll need central.
Well, they're not snarky, but in the past when I watched, there's been a glitch. I'm not afraid to I'll be like, are we supposed to be seeing the slides? Or because you'll be referencing something and there's nothing there. They still got the camera on, Chris. Or sometimes I can see your lips moving, but there's no sound.
The old Asian dub movies.
Oh gosh, those are so but no, they do a good job. In the beginning, actually, I could come sit over here and oh, yeah. Straight. Like this one up here, there's a lot of space.
Bob, are you done teaching? Well, welcome back to the adult class. How was Hawaii? It was good? Still there?
Pretty awesome.
What's the weather like in Hawaii this time of year?
Low 70s, nice.
Okay.
Rained a little while we were there, but not much.
Well, there's a reason. Yes, I would have been sad. What? I would have been sad. Knowing that.
All right, we're going to start our Bible class this morning. Starting a little late today. I knew people will probably still be making their way in. Yes. Listen up, people. So, I've only lived in Cheyenne for 4 years now, and Alicia and I were thinking, like this is a bad windy day, for you locals, you natives here. Was it a bad day yesterday? Okay. I just didn't want to be a wimp or something. our one panel on our fence in the backyard, like the wood on it, like both the crossway supports and the vertical support it just shattered, and so like it was like knocked in, and so Alicia went out there. I was in the shower, and she's like, "The fence is down." And so she rushed out there to try to take care of it. And by the time I got out of the shower, she was trapped inside the chicken coop because the wind blew over our little box ladder that she uses to get in there. And so she went inside, and so then I was like, all right, well, I'm out here by myself now. And that fence was like, I'm pretty sure I'm bruised on this shoulder trying to like knock into that fence and pound a stake into the ground. Now I'm a whiner, right? What did you say, Annette?
So the National Weather Service posted today that our peak gust yesterday was 90.
90. Yeah. It was probably that one that when I was out on the fence just nearly knocked me right over. But hopefully if you own a trampoline that you still have it. I saw on Facebook a lot of people posting like, I have a trampoline in my yard now. Didn't buy one, don't own one, but it's here. I got a trampoline. Look at this. Anyways, we're starting a new Bible class this morning in Genesis. And the first question that I have before we get into anything is like, why should we study Genesis? It's the beginning. Why else? I mean,
Because that's where everything starts. Like, that's where all of our history. You got to know that stuff.
that's where it all starts. I mean, at least that's what my history teacher told me, right? Like, if you don't know your history, you're something. I wasn't really paying attention. Scott.
Trying to learn from, if you're a smart person and you're trying to teach something to somebody with limited background and limited experience, this is a good example of how you would go about it.
Okay. Yeah. If someone doesn't know much about the Bible, what a great place to start, because you want to talk about foundational concepts and moments in our history, not just like religiously speaking, but as the human race, right? Steve.
Two reasons. One, it's referenced throughout the entire Bible, so how would you understand what it's talking about? Number two, it teaches us the character of God.
Teaches us the character of God, and Steve said, if you couldn't hear him, the book of Genesis is referenced a lot of places, not just in the Old Testament. We're going to look at some of that this morning, but definitely in the New Testament. You think about how many times New Testament writers or Jesus himself references something that happened in the book of Genesis. And so apparently it was important to him and the rest of the Bible writers for this as a work of literature to be known. Any other thoughts? Why should we study Genesis? Yeah, John?
We have no need for Jesus.
Yeah. It's if all we knew was the Jesus, we have a solution without a problem, right? And so it's like we don't get the full scope of the picture or the problem, or really to understand the significance of the solution. Absolutely, all those things you guys knocked it out of the park. I had all of it, but you guys brought them up. So we're not going to get really into Genesis very much today. This is all introductory type stuff, and this is I don't know how you guys feel about introductory lessons, but it will give you some things to be looking for as we're going through Genesis. I have no idea. I haven't mapped it out yet of how long it's going to take us to get through this book. But we're going to be here for a while because, as was mentioned, there's a lot of stuff that happens in just the first 6 chapters of Genesis. That's going to take us a while in order to sort through because all of it comes with questions. And then after chapter 6, then there's all of these people and things that happen to these people. So we might be here for a while, but the good thing about that is that Genesis it's pretty action-packed. That's why most people, when they start reading the Bible and they say, like, I'm just going to start at the beginning, they get through Genesis, and it's just like, oh man, this is like, we're traveling through time, and this person goes here, and you're like, there's story to it, and there's characters, and death, and betrayal, and all of these things, and then Exodus is very similar, and then you get through those other books, and it's like, oh, it really slows down. But Genesis is so action-packed. Let's begin with the word Genesis. The Hebrew of this word, I'm going to tell you how to pronounce it, because if you don't know how to pronounce it, you might get yourself in trouble with this one. It is pronounced Bereshith. All right. So the way you remember that is that middle E. Think of that like in parentheses there, that it's its own sound. All right. Bereshith. Bereshith. That's where we get our word Genesis from, or the Greek is where we get Genesis from, but it means beginning or origin. It's the first word in the Bible. We know it as in the beginning, right? That's how it's translated for us. But this is what the word means. It's the first word in the Hebrew. And since we're talking about beginnings or origins, what all began in Genesis? What do you think? All materials things. So the physical realm, really. Okay, what else? Put on your thinking caps. I got 8 things. Monica? Okay. The relationship between God and man, that began in Genesis. Yeah, Annette. Sin. Yeah. We're going to see that. What else? What was that, Tracy? Life. In multiple ways. Life begins. Mark? Yeah, true. People are still in our, like, oh, we're so knowledgeable and refined. It's like the moon's going to move in front of the sun, and we got to go see it. It's going to be light, and then it's going to be dark, and then it's going to be light again. And I saw this. Someone posted it on Facebook. This map of all the Airbnbs. And where that path of totality is, there's like no openings. There's like they're completely booked out for this weekend and up through tomorrow. But are they really? Oh, okay. Not here though. Okay. I was like, what? That's wild. You guys got the world, the human race, a sin in the world. What began in Genesis? What about the promise of redemption? You don't remember that one? We're going to cover it. What began in Genesis? Families. Families, right? Family life. Husband and wife, children. Like that wasn't a thing. And then it was a thing. civilization. Steve, what were you going to say? Death began. As much as we see life being introduced, we're also introduced to death. What a thought. And then also, I have the nations of the world. We start to see people, and we're going to see this, and we're going to make note of that as, like the human race begins as just this, you can count it on both your hands, and then it multiplies past that, and people move off into different parts, and that's how all of these nations of the world were started. And then finally, with that, not only the nations of the world, but then the Hebrew race as well. That'll be towards the end. And so the 8 that I have for you note takers out there: the world, human race, sin, promise of redemption, family life, civilization, nations of the world, and the Hebrew race. Annette, what were you going to say?
I was just saying languages too.
Language itself, absolutely. Starting as a one language, and then we get the whole Tower of Babel event that took place. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say time.
Time? Oh, yeah. What a good one. Of time being a thing. Absolutely. The book of Genesis is divided up into 10 sections called Toledotes. And Toledot means generations or descendants. You probably are familiar with what I'm talking about, where several times in the Bible, not just Genesis, but particularly in Genesis, we see, and the generations of, or the descendants of so-and-so, and then we get these this person begat, this person begat, this person begat, this person begat, this person, right? All of those are different sections that we can divide up through Genesis. And so if you didn't know that, now you know. Each time it's used is a structural marker. When you see the phrase, "these are the generations," what about the theme of Genesis? There are, I don't know how keywordy you are or not. I know some people love keywords. Some people have heard enough about keywords. But some big keywords in Genesis are covenant, seed, bless, land, and God, whether it's translated from Elohim or Yahweh or Jehovah. Covenant is used 25 times and is especially important around chapters 15 through 17. The primary covenant in Genesis is the one God makes with Abraham. The word seed is used 58 times, sometimes translated descendant or offspring. The word bless or blessing is used 68 times. People desired a blessing from God throughout the book of Genesis. And you're going to see, especially the blessing part of this become a thing that propels the narrative through this book. The word land is used 167 times. Sometimes translated earth. Chapters 1 through 11, it's primarily translated earth. After chapter 12, it's translated land. But it's the same word. It's just in reference to two different things. And then we have the names of God, Elohim and Yahweh. And we see a big change in these as well. Elohim is basically the idea of, it's more of the generic God. It means supreme one or mighty one, whereas the YHWH, also known as the Tetragrammaton, that's more the personal name of God. And we see, we get the the explanation of that in Exodus. If you remember when Moses is talking to God through the burning bush, and God finally convinces Moses to be the deliverer for his people, Moses asks the question, like, which God should I say sent me? Because, I mean, if you think about, Moses grew up in Egypt, and he's going back to Egypt, the land of literally hundreds and hundreds of gods, that he knows that the first thing that they're going to ask him when he says, hey, God sent me, they're going to say, which God? And so Moses asks this question of, who shall I say sent me? And God responds, tell them the I am sent you. For I am that I am. That's the YHWH comes from. It's the personal name of God. That's where we get our, if you've seen the name Yahweh, that's where we get it from, or Jehovah, that's where we get it from. There are no vowels in Hebrew. You have to supply them, and so we have these consonants, Y, H, W, H, and if you supply the vowels, you either get Yahweh or Jehovah. Because a Y in Hebrew sounds like a J, and a V in Hebrew sounds like a V sound, so Jehovah. Anyways, now you're smarter, and you can win Bible trivia next time that question comes up. Taking all of this, covenant, seed, blessing, land, God, we can come up with this theme. What is the theme of Genesis? That through the establishment of a covenant, Yahweh Elohim will bless the righteous seed by giving them the promised land. Was that? That's deep. Thank you. I will make sure my Genesis teacher at Bear Valley knows that you thought that was deep, because I got that straight from him. That is a thesis statement, if you will, for the entire book. The key verse or passage for not just Genesis, but the entire Pentateuch, which is the first 5 books of the Bible, is found in Genesis 12, 1 through 3. I'm gonna go over there and read that. Genesis 12, 1 through 3. We're going to have a little bit of discussion about this key passage, because we're going to have it, in a much more complete way once we get to chapter 12. But this is what it says. Now the Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." In this verse, I believe we get, if not all, most of those key words and this idea. Why do you think this passage is so important to the whole of Genesis? What do you think, Annette?
I think it's the foundation of the entire book. I mean, maybe not the entire book, but going forward.
Yeah. Wow.
Mark?
I don't know that this idea is a theme of Genesis, but there are concepts introduced, the very basic ones of life: good and evil, right and wrong. Mentioned here, God even says there's going to be some people who are not good, and I'll curse them.
Yeah. Good, evil, right, wrong, blessing, and curse. Fits the theme. This passage here is kind of, even though it's not at the midpoint of the book, where we would typically consider an intersection or a crossroads, but it is the kind of the crossroads of the book. Before this point, chapters 1 through 11 is kind of like this getting us to the point. What all happened before the time of Abraham, right? And I mean, even though we are given a lot of information, and there's a lot of stuff that happens in those 11 chapters, you think of all of the time and words and space that is given to Abraham's family after this point. It's the rest of not just Genesis, it's the rest of the Bible, right? Like, this is a key point for all of humanity. Specifically when God says, "In you all the families of the earth shall be blessed." Now that's when we now enter the story. You and I, our families, right? All of the families of the earth will be blessed by whatever is going on here with a man named Abram. This starts everything, and we are still, even though the Bible ends in Revelation around the year AD 100, we are still experiencing this statement that God makes to a man here in Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3. We're still experiencing this blessing today. Scott?
Obviously the Hebrews are important and critical to the situation. But, even before that, we get in Genesis that God had relationship with the people he had created prior to that time. He wanted this relationship. We are the crown jewel of his creation.
Yeah.
And we're going to see, his patience. That's why he calls himself a living God, because it's a relationship. It's not a one-way thing like the people of Egypt had with their idols, etc.
Yeah. Absolutely. So,
Key verse, key passage here, very important. We're going to cover it in more depth and detail when we finally get to chapter 12. But as far as introduction notes, this passage here is very important. What about the purpose of the book? Like, why do we have it? As for you Bible scholars out there, you know that there are several different genres of books that we have in the Bible, right? There's law books, there are prophetic books, there's song books that we have, and Genesis would be considered a history, right? It's telling the story, right? This happened, and then this happened, and this happened. These are the people, these are the times, these are the descendants, this is the place, it's history. But the purpose of the writer may not be this as the same as our purpose in approaching this material. And so, even though the Bible, Genesis, does give us several answers to our questions that we might have about the universe, about time itself, about science and stuff like that. Genesis is not a scientific textbook. That's not what it was written to do. Now, we can still glean things from a scientific perspective from it, but to view Genesis as only a scientific textbook, I think would be a disservice to what the purpose of the text is in the first place. It's not a scientific textbook. It's not designed to answer all of our scientific questions, like what is the age of the earth, or what does Genesis 1 indicate about the process of human adaptation to various environments, or what about animal adaptation? And all of these questions that we might have in reference to these scientific ideas. Like I said, we can glean some scientific things from it, but that is not the purpose. That's not why this was written for us, is so that we could, come up with scientific hypothesis from this text. We can discover the purpose of the material by careful observation of the text. We can look for phrases that reoccur in the text, or words or ideas that reoccur. Note, for a lot of us, Genesis chapter 1, you might not know it by heart, but I'm going to say some phrases here, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, these are definitely Genesis 1. It says, and God said, quote, right? And God said. We see this several times. We see this quote, and God called. Okay? See that verses 5, 8, and 10. We see the phrase, after their kind, several times. And there, another quote that we have, and there was evening, and there was morning. We see that several times in chapter 1. And another one we see is that God saw that it was good. Verses 4, 10, 12, 18, 21, 25, 31. It says, God said that it was good. So, what can we understand about the purpose of Genesis from these statements? The phrases, and God said, and God called, as well as their other incidents of God, indicate that the creation was wholly an act of God. It was not a reaction, as in the legends of other ancient cultures, but it was planned and executed, that God was in control the entire time, and that it is His creation for His purpose. God is the main character, although we like to, and God made man, and then we're like, we're here, it's about us. It's not about us. It's about God. God is the main character here. The phrase, after their kind, clearly indicates that God designed like creatures to produce with like creatures. That things perpetuate themselves and species do not mix. There may also be religious reasons for this phrase, such as the demand that the seed line of Israel be kept pure. The commands not to mix with cultures and behavior of other nations, idol worship, etc., etc., after their kind. This was introduced right here in Genesis chapter 1, that then would be expanded on as you go through the story of the Bible. The phrase, and there was morning and there was evening, is a structural marker, as are the other repeated phrases. It does seem to indicate a literal 24-hour day was in mind here. That the fact that the text is so highly structured indicates a definite plan of action in the writer's mind. The phrase, and God saw that it was good, is the main thrust of the Bible writer here. Everything that God made was good. God is good, and so is everything else, as long as it is in harmony with God. And when God sees anything that is not good, He corrects it. And that we're going to see in Genesis chapter 2. The writer is establishing that all was created good, so that he can show how evil and pain and death came into the world, and can show man the only hope for correcting that problem. What's the purpose of the book? We can find it right here in chapter 1. But who wrote it? Let me ask you that. Who wrote Genesis? How do you know that?
That's what I want to know.
Yeah, Debbie. It's Moses. It's Moses. Yeah. The Pentateuch itself claims Mosaic authorship. I'm going to give you a bunch of verses here And you're just going to have to trust me. But you have the references, so you can correct me on it if I'm wrong. In Numbers 1:1, it says, God spoke to Moses. Numbers 2:1, God spoke to Moses and Aaron. Numbers 36:13, God spoke through Moses. Numbers 17:23, God spoke to Moses. Numbers 33:2, Moses recorded their journeys, part of the Pentateuch, and what God said. In Joshua 8:32, Joshua was the one to write the account of Moses' death. In Joshua 24:26, Joshua himself wrote words in the book of the law of God. The Pentateuch claims Mosaic authorship, that we see this idea or this scene of God speaking to Moses and Moses recording it, which would include not just the book of Numbers, but Genesis, Exodus, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, the entire Pentateuch. Number 2 reason, how do we know that Moses wrote it? The rest of the Old Testament claims Mosaic authorship. In Judges 3, verse 4, they thought that Moses wrote the Pentateuch. In 1 Chronicles 15:15, it claims as Moses commanded when referencing the Pentateuch. In 1 Kings 2:3, it talks about the commandments according to the law of Moses. And then in 2 Kings 14:6, according to the book of the law of Moses. The rest of the Old Testament claims Mosaic authorship. And then number 3, the New Testament writers also thought that Moses was the author. In Luke 20, verse 28, it says, and they asked him a question saying, Teacher, Moses wrote for us that if a man's brother dies, having a wife but no children, the man must take the widow and raise up offspring for his brother. Even these people who are coming to Jesus understood that Moses was the one who wrote the law as given to him by God. In John 8, verse 5, it says, Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. So what do you say? These are Pharisees coming to Jesus with the woman caught in adultery here, and they view Moses as the author of the law. In Mark 12, verse 26, it says, And as for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses and in the passage about the bush, how God spoke to him, saying, I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. Has anyone ever heard of the documentary hypothesis? Great. That's why I did not include it in my notes, because the documentary hypothesis is just a very grueling paper that all the freshmen have to write at Bear Valley about the authorship of Genesis. It's basically a weeding out system of if you can write this paper, then you're supposed to be here, and if you can't, going to be a rough 2 years. But there are all sorts of ideas and hypotheses about who wrote Genesis. And the documentary hypothesis is one of those that claims that it wasn't one person that wrote it, that it was just, Genesis is basically just this like amalgamation of all these different source documents that are out there, and then some editor along the way came through and kind of stitched them together. The only problem with that, if you do look up the documentary hypothesis, is that none of these, quote, source documents have ever been found or have ever been referenced to. Neither has the editor. There's been no evidence of there being this, philosophical editor out there who brought these together. There's no reference about his existence or reference to an editor at all in any of the archaeological finds that we've been able to see in the history of the human race. So it is a hypothesis for a reason, but the Bible claims that Moses was the author of Genesis and the rest of the Pentateuch. But when was it written? Approximately 1400 BC. And why? Why 1400 BC? Because that's when the Israelites or the Hebrews were delivered out of Egypt. And then, they're about to cross into the promised land and they have some doubts. And so then they're forced to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Seems like a really good time if writing takes you a long time to write something. You got 40 years. What else are you going to do? And so, at least a lot of scholars, I agree with them, think that Genesis and the rest of the Pentateuch was written during these wilderness wanderings because it would be the perfect opportunity for that to happen before the whole, it couldn't have been written if it was written by Moses during the conquest, because Moses wasn't around for the conquest of the promised land. And 40 years is a long time if you're writing stuff on stone tablets. So, all right, that is the introduction to the book of Genesis. Any questions? You got 3 minutes.
You mentioned that it was written on stone tablets.
We don't know that. Because when Moses brought down the law from Mount Sinai, right? What was it on? It was on stone tablets. So I just assume it's like, well, if stone tablets are good enough for God, it's good enough for Moses. And they got this big, they got this big box that's being carried around for them anyways. That's where the law is going to go. That's where it's eventually going to go anyways. So let's put the stone tablets with the other stone tablets. We don't know that. We don't know that. I shouldn't have said that. leading my students astray. So Chris said they were written on stone tablets.
So do you think he brought the stone tablets down from the mountain in one trip? That would be really heavy.
I think the text indicates that. But this is not a study on Exodus, okay?
I know, but I asked any questions.
We studied Exodus like 2 years ago. Go back. Yes, ma'am.
What reference did the Israelites follow before this was written? Just basically the Ten Commandments?
You mean like during the time of the patriarchs, like in Noah's day, like what did they follow? We're going to talk about that when we get there, because that is the time of the patriarchs, which is a very interesting time. There's a lot of questions, not a lot of answers in the time of the patriarchs, because we're not given explicitly a lot of those answers, like who were the Nephilim? Ponder that, and we'll get back on, we'll look at Genesis chapter 1 next week. All right, let's pray. One more question. What are these pictures? I have no idea. It looks like the earth, right? Or maybe this is the like what did the earth look like before the waters and the earth were separated? I have no idea. There's the moon. We got that. There's east and west on there. but it was just a graphic that I found. Looked cool. Gives you something to look at if you're not listening to me. All right, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time. God, as we start digging into the book of Genesis, God, be with us. Help us to have discerning minds as we consider the text and wrestle with its meaning and what you would have us to know. God, the beginning is so vitally important as we consider our present and our futures, to know what has happened before us and where you have been walking with mankind from the very beginning. God, help us to grow closer to you through this study in our knowledge and our relationship with you. God, please be with us now as we enter into this time of worship, that we might give you as our Creator all of the glory and honor and praise that you so rightly deserve. We love you. It's in your Son's name that I pray. Amen.